4 million views. That's how many people watched my younger brother film my car in the parking lot of a high-end Chicago steakhouse during his college acceptance celebration and say, "This is my sister's ride." Pure junk you'd see driven by someone who never finished high school. He zoomed in on my 12-year-old Toyota Camry laughing the whole time, then posted the clip straight to Facebook. The comments came fast and brutal. "Your sister needs a new life, not a new car." Embarrassing for the family. Who shows up to a celebration in that he liked the worst ones, pinned his favorite to the top, and watched the likes roll in? I'm Angela Fox. I'm 48 years old. I still drive that same Toyota Camry. I buy my clothes wherever the quality is solid and the price makes sense. Sometimes a department store clearance rack, sometimes a small boutique. I don't post on social media. I don't wear anything that announces my presence. I just live quietly. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing who's part of this community. I watched that video multiple times, not because it hurt, but because I was calculating exactly what was coming next. His graduation party was only 1 week away. The trustee had already started the process, and everything was about to change. That video didn't come out of nowhere. It was simply the latest example of how my family had been viewing me for decades, through the lens of what they could see on the surface. I run a commercial real estate management firm that operates primarily across the Midwest. The portfolio includes Class A office towers, regional shopping centers, and several logistics facilities. Current assets under management exceed $75 million. My personal holdings are separate, a mix of direct property ownership, private equity stakes in real estate funds, and a diversified securities portfolio. Between the rental income dividends and capital gains, my net worth has been in the 8-figure range for quite some time. I haven't taken an active salary from the company in years because the passive streams cover everything I need and more. None of that is visible. I still drive an older car. My wardrobe is practical. Good fabrics, reasonable prices, nothing that screams money. I don't post vacation photos or check-ins at exclusive places. I don't feel the need to announce my success when I walk into a room. That low profile isn't an accident. It's a deliberate choice I made long ago. From the earliest age, my parents, Ronald and Marilyn, made it clear who mattered most in our house. Justin arrived when I was already 25 years older, the late-in-life surprise they had hoped for, especially because he was the boy. Almost overnight, the household shifted to orbit around him. New toys, private coaching, the best schools, constant praise for every small accomplishment. If Justin wanted something, it appeared. If he struggled, extra resources poured in. Ronald would beam with pride at his son's every move. Marilyn doted endlessly, excusing anything as boys being boys. I was cast in a different role entirely. I was the mature one, the one who didn't require attention because I was strong and independent. By middle school, I handled most of my own scheduling, transportation, and chores. When I needed help with homework or college planning, the response was usually that they were busy with Justin's activities. Ronald often said things like, "You're the smart one. You'll manage." Marilyn would add that Justin needed more guidance because he was younger and still finding his way. The favoritism wasn't loud or violent. It was steady and quiet, 1,000 small decisions that added up to one clear message: Justin's needs came first, and mine were optional. I learned quickly not to ask for much. By 16, I had after-school jobs to fund my own expenses. By 18, the day after high school graduation, I packed what fit in my used hatchback and moved into a cramped studio apartment downtown, paid for with summer earnings and a partial scholarship I'd secured alone. My parents didn't fight it. Ronald called it a good life lesson in self-reliance. Marilyn shed a few tears but focused mostly on how Justin would miss having me around to help with his homework. I left without drama. I worked full-time while taking night classes, lived frugally, took every internship offered, and slowly climbed. First small property management contracts, then larger deals, partnerships, acquisitions. Every milestone was mine alone. No family celebration, no shared pride. I never broadcast any of it. Early on, I realized that displaying wealth to people who had already decided I was the practical but unremarkable sibling would only invite dismissal or resentment. A new car would have been labeled trying too hard. A nice home would have sparked comments about how I'd changed. Keeping everything understated protected me from those reactions. It let me attend family events without constant scrutiny or comparisons I had no interest in winning. Over time, I watched Justin absorb the lessons our parents taught through their actions. He grew into someone who measured people quickly, by their car, their clothes, the restaurants they chose. Ronald and Marilyn encouraged it, complimenting his good taste and ambition. When he earned acceptance to an elite university, they acted as though it was purely his genius, rarely acknowledging the advantages they'd provided every step of the way. Despite the history, despite the imbalance that never really corrected itself, I still chose to help Justin. Not because Ronald or Marilyn asked, not because I felt obligated by their version of family duty, but because I believed that family, if nourished the right way, could still turn out okay. And that belief led me to take a step that remained completely hidden from everyone else in the family. Right after Justin was born, I established a trust fund in his name. $1,400,000 accumulated steadily through annual contributions I made personally. To keep my involvement invisible, I routed everything through a reputable law firm specializing in estate planning. The account was structured under a blind foundation with no identifying details linking back to me as the source. Statements and updates went directly to my parents as guardians during his minority, labeled simply as a family educational trust. Ronald and Marilyn were aware a substantial fund existed for Justin. They spoke about it openly at family gatherings, calling it the family legacy we set aside, or the inheritance account we've been building for his future. They genuinely believed it was a joint effort from their own savings, perhaps supplemented by some distant relative's contribution they'd forgotten about. They never dug deeper because the balance increased reliably each year without requiring anything from them. It fit perfectly into their narrative of good parenting, and they accepted the vague explanations from the law firm without question. In reality, I was the only contributor. Every deposit, every growth increment came exclusively from my income and investment returns. No one else added a cent. I didn't make it an unconditional gift. From the beginning, I insisted on including a character clause, a set of behavioral conditions tied to the full release of principal. The language was precise. The beneficiary must consistently demonstrate respect and integrity toward others. Specific examples outlined in the agreement included prohibitions against public humiliation of family members, sustained patterns of derogatory comments about people's economic status or personal choices, and using any platform to encourage cruelty for personal gain or attention. Any material breach would trigger a formal review process handled independently by the trustee, an experienced attorney with no prior connection to our family. The trustee would collect verifiable evidence such as screenshots, timestamps, and public interaction records. If the violation met the defined threshold, the trustee would present findings to me as the settler for final determination. Upon confirmation of forfeiture, the entire balance would transfer immediately to the designated secondary beneficiary, a scholarship foundation supporting first-generation college students who demonstrated strong academic effort and community involvement. I did not design the trust to control Justin. I designed it to protect the minimum values I believe any person should uphold. Basic decency, especially when you don't know who has quietly supported you along the way. The contributions continued on schedule for over 2 decades. During strong years for my company, I increased the amount significantly. The fund covered private high school tuition that my parents thought came from their budgeting extracurricular programs they assumed were scholarships. Justin earned himself, and even part of the down payment on the sports car he drove in college. All of it flowed seamlessly, anonymously. Justin reached adulthood none the wiser about the true source. My parents continued to take quiet pride in their foresight. I stayed silent, watching from a distance as the balance approached the release threshold. Then one morning, several weeks after the Facebook post exploded, my phone rang while I was reviewing quarterly reports. The caller ID showed Norman Hale, the trustee I had appointed from the start, because of his reputation for absolute impartiality and attention to detail. "Angela," he began, his tone measured and professional. "I need to bring something to your attention regarding the trust." He explained that the standard monitoring protocol, quarterly reviews of public mentions involving the beneficiary and family, had flagged Justin's recent activity. The video post, combined with his active engagement in the comments section, qualified as a clear instance of the prohibited conduct outlined in the character clause. Norman walked me through the documentation. He had already compiled high-resolution captures of the original clip transcripts of Justin's replies, encouraging harsher comments, records of likes on particularly cruel responses, and metrics showing sustained interaction over multiple days. He noted the scale, millions of views and shares, as amplifying evidence of intent to publicize the disparagement. Based on the explicit examples in Section 4, he said this constitutes a material breach. The conduct is public, documented, ongoing, and directly targets a family member based on perceived economic status. My independent assessment is that the provision has been violated. He outlined next steps calmly. If I chose to proceed, I would provide written authorization. The forfeiture would execute within days, redirecting the full $1,400,000 to the Scholarship Foundation. No appeal process existed beyond my decision as settler. I asked for clarification on a couple of procedural points: timeline for transfer notification requirements, tax implications for the secondary beneficiary. Norman answered each with precision, referencing specific clauses he had helped draft years earlier. By the time we ended the call, the facts were undeniable. Justin had chosen to build attention on cruelty towards someone he didn't realize had funded most of his advantages. The mechanism I created to encourage better choices had just documented that those choices weren't there. The decision crystallized the moment Norman finished explaining the next steps. He emailed the forfeiture authorization form that afternoon. I opened it on my desktop, the document crisp and formal, waiting for my signature. I printed it out, placed it on the kitchen island, and picked up a pen. My hand hovered for a few seconds, not out of sympathy for Justin, not out of second-guessing the violation, but because this single act would sever the final faint possibility that my family could ever treat me as an equal. That Ronald and Marilyn might someday acknowledge my worth without comparison. That Justin could mature into someone who valued support he never knew he had. The ink would make it irreversible. I signed without further delay. The pause was brief, a quiet acknowledgement of what was ending. I scanned the signed pages and sent them back immediately. Norman replied with confirmation and began processing the transfer. The entire $1,400,000 moved to the Scholarship Foundation within 2 business days. That fund operated with complete transparency. Applications required proof of first-generation status, household income below a set threshold, a solid academic record, and at least 2 recommendation letters focused explicitly on character. Examples of integrity, perseverance, and positive impact on others. Review panels evaluated submissions anonymously, ignoring photos, social profiles, or personal connections. Awards paid full tuition fees, books, and a modest living stipend, ensuring recipients graduated debt-free. The sudden influx would cover 15 additional students for 4 years each. While the funds redirected silently, the rest of the family carried on planning as though everything remained on track. Justin's graduation loomed closer, and excitement built steadily. Marilyn called frequently with updates, potential venues, color schemes, catering quotes. Ronald offered opinions on the bar setup, eager to contribute his expertise. Justin shared mock-ups of the invitations and guest list drafts, asking for input on who to include from the extended side. They chose the premier private dining space at a renowned downtown Chicago steakhouse, the one with white tablecloth, sommelier service, and a reputation for hosting power lunches. The room accommodated large parties comfortably with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river, custom lighting options, and a dedicated entrance for privacy. The menu featured premium dry-aged steaks, lobster tails, truffle sides, and a tiered cake from a high-end bakery. A mixologist was booked to create custom cocktails named after Justin's university mascot. Decor included elegant floral arrangements in school colors, framed photos from his college years on display tables, and a large banner congratulating the graduate. The invitation list reached 150 names: classmates, fraternity brothers, former teammates, cousins, aunts, and uncles, plus a handful of LinkedIn connections Justin thought might prove useful later. Ronald wrote the check for the deposit without hesitation, commenting often about how proud he was to give his son a proper send-off. Marilyn managed the details meticulously: table assignments, dietary requests, even coordinating a slideshow of Justin's highlights to play during dessert. A formal invitation arrived at my door shortly after the venue was locked in: thick cream stock gold foil lettering addressed in Marilyn's neat script. Tucked inside was a handwritten card. "It would mean so much to have you there for Justin's special night. We're all so proud, and family moments like this are important." I left it on the hallway table for several days, weighing whether to attend. Staying home would have been simpler. No awkward conversations, no forced smiles. But part of me needed to witness the event firsthand, to observe how far they would go in celebrating someone who had just forfeited everything through his own actions. I replied that I would come. On the evening of the party, I chose an outfit similar to what I wore to most family functions: tailored black trousers, a silk blouse in a neutral tone, low heels, minimal accessories. Nothing flashy, nothing new. I drove the Toyota Camry that had sparked the whole chain of events, found a spot in the public lot nearby, and walked over alone with a simple card containing a bookstore gift certificate. The private room buzzed when I stepped in. Guests milled about with drinks in hand. Servers offered trays of mini crab cakes and prosciutto-wrapped asparagus. Ronald stood near the door, shaking hands, looking sharp in a tailored blazer. Marilyn circulated with a bright smile, guiding people toward the bar or their assigned seats. Justin was the center of attention near a high-top table, laughing loudly with a group of friends already toasting his future. No one mentioned my arrival outfit or how I got there. The focus remained firmly on the graduate. The night was still young. The energy in the private dining room peaked right after the entrees were cleared. Justin looked every bit the successful graduate in his custom navy suit tie, knotted perfectly hairstyled just so. He strode confidently to the podium set up near the Riverview windows, grabbing the microphone with the ease of someone used to attention. The chatter died down quickly as guests turned their seats toward him, phones already half raised for photos. He started with a wide smile. "I want to thank the two people who made all of this possible, my mom and dad." He gestured toward Ronald and Marilyn, who sat at the head table looking proud. Ronald lifted his glass in acknowledgement, chest puffed slightly. Marilyn pressed a hand to her hard eyes shining. "You've supported me every step," Justin went on, voice warm. "From Little League to late-night study sessions, you were always there. And now, with graduation official, I'm finally getting access to that big family trust we've been talking about forever." He paused for effect, grinning wider. "Let's just say the future's looking pretty comfortable, maybe even private jet comfortable." Laughter rippled through the room, followed by enthusiastic applause. Friends cheered loudest, whistling and raising their drinks. Relatives joined in with hearty claps. Ronald chuckled deeply, nodding to nearby guests, as if confirming his son's bright prospects. Marilyn dabbed at happy tears, mouthing, "That's my boy," to a cousin beside her. Justin stepped down amid more cheers, accepting backslaps and hugs as he made his way back to the bar area. I remained at my table toward the rear, sipping water, observing the scene without joining the excitement. Then the side door to the room opened precisely on schedule. Norman Hale entered without fanfare. Gray suit, impeccable leather portfolio held firmly face, expressing nothing but professional calm. He walked straight to the center of the floor, positioning himself where Justin had stood moments earlier. The noise level dropped noticeably as people registered the unexpected arrival. A few guests exchanged glances. Someone near the front whispered, "Who's that?" Norman waited until the room quieted further, then spoke clearly into the lingering hush. "Good evening, everyone. My name is Norman Hale, and I serve as independent trustee for the educational trust established for Justin Fox." Murmurs started immediately. Justin, halfway through a toast with friends, lowered his glass and turned around. Ronald's brow furrowed deeply. Marilyn leaned forward, confusion evident. Norman opened his portfolio and began reading from the document in a measured, audible tone. Under the terms of the trust agreement, a forfeiture review has been completed. The original principal of $1,400,000 plus accrued growth has been subject to the character provisions in Section 4. He let the words land before continuing. Those provisions mandate consistent behavior reflecting respect and integrity toward others, public conduct that includes deliberate disparagement of family members, particularly when based on perceived financial status and amplified for broader engagement, qualifies as a material breach. Verified evidence of such conduct has been reviewed and confirmed. Justin took a step forward, voice sharp. "Hold on. What exactly are you talking about?" Norman did not pause. As a result, the trust has been dissolved effective immediately. All assets have been redirected to the secondary beneficiary designated in the original agreement. The room went unnaturally quiet, the kind of silence where individual breaths seem loud. Ronald pushed back his chair and stood, face flushing dark red. "This is absurd. You can't barge into a private event and make announcements like this." Marilyn rose beside Justin, grabbing his sleeve. "There has to be a mistake," she said, voice rising in a pitch. Tears started flowing as she looked around for support. Norman remained composed. The process followed the exact protocol outlined in the governing document. "No error has occurred." Then he delivered the revelation I had instructed him to include, verbatim. "The settler of the trust, the individual who contributed every dollar from the date of Justin's birth to the present, is Angela Fox." All eyes swung to me. I met them steadily from my seat, hands folded in my lap. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the dam broke. A woman at a nearby table whispered to her husband, "What's going on here?" Two of Justin's fraternity brothers exchanged wide-eyed looks before one asked loudly across the tables, "Wait, what does this actually mean?" Another guest near the bar muttered audibly, "Is this real or some kind of joke?" Phones emerged everywhere. Lifted high cameras activated recording from every angle. The soft clicks and glow of screens became constant. Someone started live streaming openly. Ronald advanced several steps, pointing at Norman. "You have no right to destroy my son's night with this garbage. We'll have lawyers on this tomorrow." Marilyn pulled Justin into a protective embrace, sobbing now. "How could you?" she cried in my direction. "On his graduation. How could you be so cruel?" Justin stood rigid, color drained from his face. "Angela, it was you." The whole fund whispers escalated into overlapping questions. "She funded everything. I thought it was their parents' money. Did he really lose it all?" The celebratory mood evaporated completely. The elegant space moments ago filled with laughter and clinking glasses now felt like a tense courtroom. Servers froze along the walls, unsure whether to continue service. The bartender stopped mid-pour. Floral centerpieces and graduation banners suddenly seemed out of place against the charged atmosphere. A few guests shifted uncomfortably, debating whether to stay or slip out. Others leaned in, captivated by the unfolding drama. Phones kept rolling, capturing every reaction. Ronald's fury, Marilyn's tears, Justin's shock. Norman closed his portfolio calmly. "The matter is concluded. Documentation is available to the beneficiary upon request. I will see myself out." He nodded once in my general direction and exited the way he came, leaving the room in stunned disarray. The revelation hung thick in the air, reshaping everything that had come before it. I stood up slowly and started walking toward the center of the room. Guests moved aside without being asked, creating a clear path between the tables. Phones tracked my every step, lenses pointed directly at me. The low buzz of conversation faded further as more people noticed the shift. I stopped several feet from where Justin, Ronald, and Marilyn stood together, close enough for my words to carry to them and the nearest tables without shouting. Justin found his voice first, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Angela, come on. It was just a joke. I didn't mean anything by it." He searched my face for some sign of softening, hands open in a pleading gesture. A couple of his friends hovered behind him, looking uncertain whether to intervene or stay back. Ronald moved forward half a step, placing himself partially between me and Justin like a shield. "You're ruining your brother's entire future," he said sharply, voice thick with anger. "Over one dumb social media post? This is vindictive, and you know it." Several relatives at nearby tables nodded, murmuring agreement loud enough to be heard. Marilyn gripped Justin's sleeve tightly, tears rolling down her cheeks. "You've always resented him," she said, voice breaking. "Ever since he was born. And now you choose tonight to take everything away." Her accusation echoed slightly in the hushed space, drawing sympathetic looks from guests who only knew the surface story. I let their words settle for a few seconds, looking at each of them in turn. Justin's panic, Ronald's outrage, Marilyn's wounded expression. The room held its collective breath. Then I spoke, tone steady and low. "Resented him," I said. "I paid every semester of Justin's university tuition, the prestigious one you told everyone he earned through hard work and your guidance. I covered the full cost of his private high school years that you passed off as careful saving on your part. I put down the bulk of the payment for the sports car he's parked outside tonight, the one you both praised as such a smart adult purchase." I paused briefly, watching the impact register. Spring break trips to Europe, the latest gaming laptops, the academic scholarships he thought came from the school, those were me. Every time. Not $1 from either of you, even though you let everyone believe it was family money you'd built together. Soft gasps spread outward from the front tables. A few guests leaned back in shock. Someone whispered, "I had no idea," clearly enough for others to hear. Justin stared at me, mouth slightly open, unable to form a response. The earlier bravado had drained away completely. Ronald opened his mouth to object, but I continued before he could. "You raised him to judge people by what they display. The car, the clothes, the lifestyle. You reinforced it every time you dismissed my choices as not ambitious enough or too plain. You taught him that quiet achievement doesn't count unless it's loud and visible." Marilyn's crying slowed to uneven breaths as she processed the list of contributions. I turned my attention fully to Justin. "You decided to grow your online image by publicly mocking someone you assumed had less. You invited strangers to laugh at my expense, never imagining that person had quietly carried most of your advantages." Then to Ronald and Marilyn. "And you enabled every bit of it. The comparisons, the favoritism, the assumption that I didn't need recognition because I was the strong one. You made sure he never had to question where good things came from." The room remained silent except for occasional shifts in chairs and the faint sound of recording devices. Phones stayed up, capturing everything. Justin tried again, voice small. "I really didn't know it was you. Please. We can work this out." Ronald recovered enough to bluster, "There has to be an appeal process or something." Marilyn extended a shaking hand toward me. "Don't tear the family apart. Not like this." I shook my head. No appeals, no second chances after the choice was made so publicly. I drew a slow breath, feeling decades of unspoken resentment resolve into clarity. "I'm not the one abandoning family tonight," I said loud enough for the immediate circle to hear plainly. "I'm simply stopping my protection of the unfairness that's existed far too long." I turned away, then walking back through the aisle that had formed. Guests stepped aside quickly, some avoiding eye contact, others watching openly as I passed. No one spoke to stop me. A few recording lights followed until I reached the exit. I pushed open the door and stepped into the cooler air of the lobby without glancing back. Outside, the city sounds felt distant. Valet attendants stood quietly near their station. I walked past the gleaming rows of high-end vehicles to my familiar Toyota under the street lamp exactly where I'd left it. I unlocked the door, slid into the driver's seat, and started the engine. As I pulled away from the curb, the steakhouse lights receded in the side mirror. The party would continue inside, perhaps with attempts to salvage the mood, perhaps with more arguments or tears. Videos would spread rapidly online. Opinions would form quickly among people who knew only fragments. None of it concerned me anymore. The long-carried burden of supporting a family that never saw my worth had finally lifted. The months that followed brought sharp consequences. Videos from the graduation party spread rapidly across social media. Clips of the trustees' announcement, the family's reactions, and my quiet departure racked up millions of views within weeks. Comment sections filled with harsh judgments, labels like entitled and ungrateful attached to Justin permanently. The original Facebook post that started everything resurfaced alongside the new footage, creating a narrative the internet embraced wholeheartedly. Justin's carefully curated online presence turned against him. A major financial firm where he had accepted a prestigious summer internship ran a routine background check that included social media screening. They discovered the viral controversy and quietly withdrew the offer, citing a mismatch with company values. Other opportunities dried up as recruiters Googled his name and found the same story dominating results. With the trust fund gone, the final semester's tuition bill arrived unpaid. Justin took out high-interest private loans to cover it, adding tens of thousands in debt to an already expensive degree. Ronald and Marilyn scrambled to help, but found their own retirement savings stretched thin after years of relying on what they thought was secure family money. The sports car was sold to free up cash, replaced by something used and practical. I heard none of this directly. No calls came, no messages arrived. The silence from their side was complete. Meanwhile, the Scholarship Foundation received the full $1,400,000 and put it to work immediately. The board selected 12 new recipients that fall, all first-generation students from working-class backgrounds who had maintained strong grades while holding jobs or caring for family. The awards covered everything: tuition, housing, meals, even textbooks and laptops. Recipients signed agreements to pay it forward through community service hours. Over the next couple of years, letters began arriving at the Foundation's anonymous post office box, handwritten notes from students describing how the funding changed their paths. One young woman wrote about graduating debt-free and landing a nursing position in an underserved clinic. A young man shared that he was the first in his family to earn a degree and now taught high school math in his old neighborhood. Another described using part of the stipend to help his parents avoid foreclosure. Each letter expressed profound gratitude to the unknown donor who believed character mattered more than circumstances. The Foundation forwarded copies to me without names or identifying details. I read them on quiet evenings, feeling a deep satisfaction that the money was finally supporting people who understood its true value. For me personally, the shift was profound. After decades of carrying the invisible load of family expectations and unspoken favoritism, I felt a genuine peace settle in. Mornings were lighter. Decisions about time and money felt entirely my own. I traveled when I wanted, pursued projects that interested me, and built deeper connections with friends who valued substance over appearance. I no longer checked for updates about Justin or my parents. Birthdays and holidays passed without obligation. The old ache of hoping for fairness faded into acceptance that some relationships cannot be fixed when one side refuses to see the imbalance. Kindness has limits, and peace arrives when we stop pouring energy into bonds held together only by unfairness. If you've ever been told that setting boundaries is selfish, I hope you know this. It never was. Maybe you were made to feel guilty for saying no, for choosing your own peace, or for refusing to carry burdens that were never yours to begin with. If that's your story, you're not alone. And more importantly, you deserve so much more than a life built on guilt and silence. You have the right to be respected. You have the right to say no without explaining yourself. You have the right to want more for your life, your heart, and your future. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you love others any less. In fact, the healthiest love always begins with self-respect. When you learn to care for your own emotional well-being, you create relationships built on honesty instead of obligation, kindness instead of fear, and mutual respect instead of sacrifice. Healing doesn't happen overnight. Sometimes it begins with one difficult conversation. Sometimes it begins with walking away. And sometimes it begins the moment you finally believe that your worth has never depended on someone else's approval. No matter how long you've carried disappointment, rejection, or emotional pain, today can be the first step toward becoming the person you've always deserved to be. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear yours. Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might be the encouragement someone else needs to find the courage to start healing too. This community exists because people are willing to remind each other that none of us has to walk this journey alone. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for staying with me until the very end. If this video brought you comfort or strength, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and explore more stories waiting for you in the description below. And always remember, protecting your peace is never selfish. It is one of the greatest acts of self-love you will ever choose.